Good evening from Washington. Welcome to the Ingraham Angle. I'm Jason Chaffetz in tonight for Laura. We've got a great show for you, full of big stories and breaking news. Democrats and Republicans actually cooperated to end a government shutdown, but many conservatives are not celebrating, and we'll tell you why. And we've got Ambassador John Bolton on The Odd Couple at the Olympics. Vice President Mike Pence sitting almost next to the sister of North Korea's dictator. But first, breaking news. President Trump has decided tonight he cannot release the Democrats' FISA memo, a rebuttal to the Republicans' memo. Trump says he is inclined to release the Democrats' memo, but it needs changes because it contains classified material and a very sensitive passage. Let's go to Fox's Ed Henry now with more.
Well, Jason, good to see you. This is a bit of a surprise because just a few hours ago, lawmakers close to the process were predicting to us that the Democrats' memo would go public as early as tonight. President Trump himself indicated to reporters in the middle of the day he was inclined to release this with at least some sensible redactions of national security information. But I think a clue of this holdup came later in the afternoon when the president huddled with lawyers from the White House counsel's office, Don McGahn, and lawyers from the Justice Department, plus the FBI director, Christopher Wray. Once you get the lawyers more deeply involved, as you know, look out, the changes may be coming. Sure enough, McGahn fired off a letter to House Intel Chairman Devin Nunes saying, quote, although the president is inclined to declassify the February 5th memo, because the memorandum contains numerous properly classified and especially sensitive passages, he's unable to do so at this time. However, given the public interest in the transparency in these unprecedented circumstances, the president has directed that the Justice Department personnel be available to give technical assistance to the Intel Committee should the committee wish to revise the February 5th memo to mitigate the risks identified by the department. Now, allies of Nunes have been saying they believe this was a bit of a setup. The Democrat Adam Schiff put classified information in there that he knew would trip this up, and then Democrats would cry out that the president is hiding something. Well, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer tonight pounced. He said, quote, the president's double standard when it comes to transparency is appalling. The rationale for releasing the Nunes memo, transparency, vanishes when it could show information that's harmful to him. Millions of Americans are asking one simple question. What is he hiding? Now, the next step for House Intel is to either accept the president's decisions, make some changes, and then send it back to the White House, or they can try to override the president in a secret session of the House. There's been only 6 of those in history, very rare. Regardless of how they do it, here's the bottom line, Jason. We're told the Democratic memo does not dispute the key point of Nunes' memo. FBI and DOJ personnel got the FISA warrant to spy on Carter Page after not telling the judge that the dossier was paid for by the DNC and the Clinton campaign, and that's going to be a key issue moving forward, Jason.
Ed, this was not expected at all. I think all of us thought that it was going to be released, but that basic underlying premise, as you said, nothing is out there, is there, that it refutes what what Devin Nunes' memo says?
At least not yet. Now, Democrat Adam Schiff and others are saying that if this memo sees the light of day, they're claiming that Devin Nunes cherry-picked information, cherry-picked intel, and that parts of their memo will refute some of the Nunes memo. But we simply don't know because we haven't seen it yet, Jason.
Now, Ed, there was also some movement at the Department of Justice with the number 3 person leaving. What do you know about that?
Yeah, this seems strange because Rachel Brand had only been on the job for 9 months, seen as maybe a star who would rise through the ranks. She's been battling trafficking. She's really been at the forefront of domestic surveillance and chasing down terrorists, key Justice Department programs. But maybe she simply wanted a more lucrative gig. We're hearing she's moving to the top legal post at Walmart. But it's hard not to notice that if Rod Rosenstein gets fired or steps down, she would have been overseeing special counsel Robert Mueller's probe. That would have put her in the middle of a political firestorm, a sign it's going to be very hard for the president to find someone who wants to replace her, probably even harder to find someone the Democrats in the Senate will confirm. They'll try to filibuster. And most of all, a lot of people in the White House are frustrated with Attorney General Jeff Sessions right now. This means Rosenstein, the deputy, may have even more influence, Jason.
Ed, thank you very much. Joining us for more reaction, we have John Solomon, a reporter for The Hill newspaper, former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino, and talk radio host and attorney Leo Terrell. Thank you all for joining us here tonight. Leo, I want to start with you. We all thought that, I thought, and I think a lot of people thought that the president may have some redactions but would ultimately release this memo, but it's not coming out tonight. How are you and the Democrats going to react to that?
Well, it's a sham, and I'll tell you why. Just last week, Jason, despite a public announcement by the FBI not to release the Republican memo, President Trump released the memo. Shame on the president, because it is very clear he did not want this memo released because it negates his argument last week that he's exonerated. It is embarrassing and shameful. There is nothing in that memo that would have prevented it released today except that it was bad PR for President Trump.
But Leo, did you see anything in the Nunes memo that was dealt with classified material about sources and methods? There wasn't.
Well, let me say, I'm going to pull rank on everybody. I'm the lawyer in this group, and I'm going to simply tell you this: the FBI said don't release it, and they released it notwithstanding. Jason, you got to answer that.
But there was no classified material about sources and methods in the Nunes memo, correct?
It was classified. There was information about the procedure and the manner in which a warrant is obtained. That information should not have been released to the American public, but it was beneficial to Donald Trump, and he released it, notwithstanding a public statement from the FBI and the Department of Justice not to release it.
Okay, John, let's go to this. There's also a word about a second dossier that is out there. Tell us what you know about that.
So in the summer of 2016, there was another pipeline of Clinton-related information coming into the State Department and then to Christopher Steele, then to the FBI. It comes through two guys that we've heard of from the past. In the old Clinton years in the 90s, you might have been involved in some of those investigations. Cody Scherer, private eye, hung around the Clintons a lot. And Sidney Blumenthal, one of their closest friends, kind of their eye spy inside the Clinton campaign. And they put the information in, and it tracks very closely to what Steele had. So you have all this information coming in. I predict when we're done, all four sources of the information that the FBI used to launch the investigation against Donald Trump, every one of them is going to have a connection to the Clinton campaign.
Now, Dan, one of the concerns that's out there, Politico is reporting tonight that Steve Bannon may have actually been picked up on some of these surveillances. How does that strike you? I mean, it's right in the heart of the campaign. And they've also got now Steve Bannon, according to Politico, that they were spying on as well.
Well, Jason, we know two things right now, despite that interesting little opening by Leo there. We know that the Obama team spied on the Trump team. Okay, that's not in dispute. How it happened may be in dispute, but we know that happened. What we also know is we know because there are court transcripts, okay? There's an actual record of this that no Democrat's going to be able to run from and no Democrat's going to have plausible deniability on. We know that the bulk of the material that went in front of those FISA court judges was provided by, in fact, the dossier, a dossier that came from two sources. Russians who passed it through Christopher Steele and Clinton campaign associates. All the Democrat memos in the world aren't going to change those two simple facts. Full stop.
You know, that's simple. That's classic talking points, Dan. You know, FBI gets their information from all different sources. The bottom line is this. Let me take a page out of Jason. Let me get a page out of. Wait. Oh, come on now. Let me get a page out of Jason's book. Trey Gowdy. You know him, Dan, don't you? Trey Gowdy said there is a need to proceed with the Russian probe. You don't disagree with Trey Gowdy, do you, Dan? Oh, okay.
Well, wait, hold on. Dan didn't say anything about that, but we're talking about the credibility
Leo,
of dossiers.
Leo, I don't know what you're talking about.
And then surveilling people that now has expanded to include potentially, at least we're looking at a report that's put out by Politico tonight that includes Steve Bannon. And that does beg the question of who else is used. Let me go to John for a second. John, where do you see this going in the next week or two?
I think the last piece of the evidence that came in that substantiated the FISA warrant at the beginning came from this ambassador, right? This Australian ambassador who hears Papadopoulos in the bar, drunk, having conversation with him. I think we're going to learn a lot more about that ambassador and where his loyalties might be. When that's all put together, I think you're going to find out four out of four things the FBI used to start listening in on the Trump campaign comes back to the Clinton family.
Now, Leo, does any of this concern you? And I got to ask you, give us look right in the camera and tell us, if Donald Trump had done this against a Democrat, you can't tell me that you'd just be sitting idly by saying, oh, the FBI has just acted perfectly in this instance.
Jason, I'm looking you and the American public straight in the eye right now. I'm leaning forward. Donald Trump is basically attacking every institution in the American government that he controls, the CIA, the FBI, Department of Justice. You want me to drink that Kool-Aid and believe that the FBI, the entire governmental security agencies are against Donald Trump? You want me to drink that Kool-Aid today on national TV? You believe that, Dan? You believe that the entire Secret Service...
Okay, let's give Dan a chance to respond here, because
I'm just listening to you babble. Yeah. Leo, you know, it's amazing. You do this, liberals do this all the time. They never actually address what you say. He goes on to something else. Here's what, notice, he never addressed at all the substance of what I said. We know for a fact the Obama team spied on the Trump team. We know the information was provided by Steele through the Russians, and we also know the information was provided through Clinton consiglieres. I know because one of them wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post today basically admitting to it, and another one went on a weekend news show, Victoria Nuland, and admitted to it too. Now Leo will go on about the Russians again, because that's what they do.
No, I'll play your game. And therefore, what? What are you making a conclusion? Tell us your conclusion. And therefore, what? What? Who committed the crime?
The Obama
Tell me the
team,
conclusion.
I mean, you may be hard of hearing, but I already said it. The Obama team spied on the Trump team. There's still no probable cause that anyone on the Trump team was a foreign agent in violation of U.S. law. No one's produced a scintilla of evidence of Russian collusion. And you're still sticking by that this was all done great because you're a police state supporter. End of story.
Let me go to John. Hold on. Let me go to John here. There are still a mountain of text messages that we have not seen.
It's true.
And is there any fallout that you're seeing? I mean, the FBI put out there that they couldn't find these missing text messages.
And they showed up.
Only to have the Inspector General, I think it was less than 48 hours, go and find them.
That's right. Yeah, I think the Inspector General's report in March will be one of the most seminal moments in this whole thing. It'll help to resolve how much politics was involved and how much legitimate law enforcement. When we see the full breadth of what the independent IG does, I think we're going to have a more complete picture, and this debate may take an entirely different tack. It will.
Leo, are you willing to accept what the Inspector General comes up with?
He's making this prediction about the Inspector General report. Can you please have me on when this report comes out? Because I hope, according to Dan, there's going to be all these indictments against the Obama administration. It's doomed. It's a great way to deflect from Donald Trump and the Russian probe. Great move, Dan. It's very smart.
No, hold on. Leo,
you're just making it up.
15 seconds. 15 seconds, Leo. What's your single best piece of evidence that Donald Trump colluded with Russians? The single best one. What is it?
Best piece of evidence, I'll use the Trey Gowdy approach. A couple of Russians were meeting with Donald Trump.
Trey Gowdy?
Trump Tower.
He's got nothing.
I'll use the same one that he used. The Trump's meeting with the Russians at Trump Tower. Pretty solid evidence there.
Dan, you get the last word. Where do you see this going?
Genius case there. Yeah, maybe Mark Warner should be under arrest too then for trying to set up a meeting with the Russians, the Democrat senator from Virginia. I mean, unbelievable. He had nothing. He had no answer for you.
The one thing I think we can all agree about, we'll be talking about this next week. We've got to move on.
True.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend. I appreciate you being here with us. While all of this is going on, key players at the White House are suddenly accused of a cover-up. Up next, how the resignation of Rob Porter amid domestic violence allegations is being used to attack the entire administration. The Trump administration is under a fierce new attack by the left and the media following the resignation of Staff Secretary Rob Porter on Wednesday. Porter was accused of domestic violence by two ex-wives, something he denies. Now, some are calling for the resignation of Chief of Staff John Kelly, claiming he has known about the allegations for months. Today, the president urged everyone to withhold judgment until all the facts are known.
I found out about it recently, and I was surprised by it. But we certainly wish him well. It's a obviously tough time for him. He did a very good job when he was in the White House. And we hope he has a wonderful career, and hopefully he will have a great career ahead of him. He says he's innocent, and I think you have to remember that. He said very strongly yesterday that he's innocent.
But the Porter allegations are creating a feeding frenzy among the president's critics.
Senior White House officials knew about these accusations against Porter by his ex-wives, and they protected Porter, and they promoted Porter.
There were really several other ways that the White House could have gone, and the choices that were made by John Kelly and others are inexcusable.
They protect abusers. There's no way of getting around it. And I guess people will say, well, it doesn't matter. You can still be a good president. You can still do your job. No.
Any other White House, as soon as you would hear that, you would get rid of the person.
The president's reaction to this, although fully in character, is utterly repulsive.
And also developing tonight, a second White House staffer has resigned, speechwriter David Sorensen, after his ex-wife claimed he was violent during their marriage, a charge that Sorensen is denying. So let's explore this with Conservative Review television host Allie Stuckey and Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall. Thank you both for being here. Leslie, I want to start with you. How do you think that the president and the White House dealt with this situation?
Well, you know, Jason, they say sometimes it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. And I think that's the problem here. It was who knew what and when and why, or in this case, why wasn't something done about it. We do know that Kelly knew about this in the fall. We do know that this information was out there in the White House to the president's attorney back a year ago, and yet there was still not a thorough investigation. Nothing was done, and they were still going forward looking into possible high-level security clearance for Porter, for this individual. That's very troubling. Further troubling for me, Jason, as a woman, is that the president today wished an alleged accused abuser of women well and said nothing about the alleged victims. That is very troublesome for me.
Allie, what was your reaction to it when you saw this story and how the White House dealt with it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I take issues of domestic violence and allegations of domestic violence very seriously. I think we can all agree on that. I'm certainly not going to gloss over that simply because I voted for Donald Trump. However, I think that we can also all agree that this was simply a bad situation that the White House has already admitted that they mishandled, and it was a bad situation that people who work for the president should be held accountable for. However, I also think that it is completely dishonest and a little bit hypocritical of the liberal media to be issuing an indictment on the entire administration and the entire presidency for mishandling a situation in the same way that it was an indictment on the entirety of the Clinton campaign when she covered up for the sexually harassing faith advisor in 2008. This is not an indictment on Trump's entire presidency. So I find that hypocrisy from some members of the liberal media to be a little bit tired and very dishonest.
Now, Leslie, even Hillary Clinton, after the fact, came back and said, even though she had a report from her campaign manager that there was sexual harassment problems, that she would not have fired that person. Did you speak out against that, or are you just speaking out against, Donald Trump?
Well, I'm glad you asked me, Jason, because you can Google it. Yes, I did. I did here on Fox, on television, on my radio show, on my column, on Twitter, and all other social media. I, as a woman, a feminist, and a woman first before my party, I have to say I was appalled by this, absolutely appalled by this. I was very open and verbal about that, and I wasn't the only person on the left who felt that way, and not the only Democrat that's just a woman that felt that way.
So,
here's the
Leslie,
problem that I have when we talk about hypocrisy.
No. I'm glad you did that. And look, I want to speak out on this, too. I think if the White House knew about this, they've got a problem. And I think they have to also have an accounting. I think the chief of staff should get a list of everybody that's working in the White House who has passed a security background check, who has question marks, and who has failed. And I saw this as the oversight chairman when I was the oversight chair. I saw part of this in the Obama administration. There were allegations. Again, I'm not trying to say that they're equal or anything else, but I'm just saying security clearances with the people in close proximity to the president is problematic. So, Leslie, I want to ask you, and then I promise I'll come over to you, Allie. But Leslie, when you have somebody who denies it and there is an accusation, what is the right thing to do? Do you let them keep their job? Do they have proximity to the president, or do they? What should happen?
Well, first of all, you read my mind, because that's what I was about to say and to talk about. I have a problem here with the hypocrisy. Let me use as an example Senator Al Franken, shall we? Although we had a photo, there were other allegations by not only the woman in the photo, but others against the senator. The senator said, I didn't do this. These claims are false. Yet he stepped down, and there was pressure among his own party, and the president said negative things. He didn't say, well, he denies it. Roy Moore, the president says he denies it. Porter, the president says he denies it. And I feel that the president, Jason, made it worse with his remarks again today, not mentioning the women. What should be done in this climate where we have so many allegations of sexual abuse and sexual harassment, the Me Too movement? I think it would be wise for any administration, left or right, to have to remove these individuals because it will be a stain on their administration.
Allie, what is the right thing to do in this situation? How do they do? If it's a he said, she said, there's a disagreement, what is the right thing to do?
Well, right now, the only thing that we can do is run on hypotheticals, and that's really all this is. Like Leslie said in the beginning, we don't know who knew what when. All we know is what the White House is telling us. And what the White House is telling us is that Mike Pence and President Trump only found out about these allegations this week. Apparently, General Kelly only knew the full extent of these allegations last week, and Porter submitted his resignation, and that resignation was accepted. And Mike Pence, on top of that, has even said, you know what, I think that we could have handled this a little bit more appropriately, which I took as taking responsibility. So at the end of the day, I think the right thing happened. Porter resigned. He's no longer in the White House, where I personally think that he belongs. Is not in the White House.
Thank you both. It is a subject that is very worthy. My personal take on it is, if there's any question about the people closest to the President of the United States, they're going to have to go take another temporary job until it gets sorted out. You don't need people with that sort of access to highly sensitive information, top secret information, and proximity to the president if there's any question marks. If you need a timeout, go sit outside and let the FBI help clean it up for you. But that's my take on it. And I thank you both for joining us. Have a great weekend. Republicans and Democrats came together to end a government shutdown, but we'll tell you why many conservatives are not celebrating. Stay tuned. President Trump signed a bipartisan budget deal into law this morning that ended another brief government shutdown. But not everybody is thrilled. Many conservatives oppose the budget, which will put the nation back on track for annual deficits of more than $1 trillion for the first time since Obama's first term. It also increases spending caps by $300 billion and suspends debt limits until March of 2019. In a series of tweets today, the president said the new budget will make the military stronger than ever and adds more jobs. But he also acknowledged, without more Republicans in Congress, we were forced to increase spending on things we do not like or want in order to finally, after many years of depletion, take care of our military. Sadly, we needed some Dem votes for passage. Must elect more Republicans in 2018 election. Senator Rand Paul failed to block the bill, imploring Republicans to stick to the principles of fiscal conservatives have preached for years. But he's being blasted by critics on the left and even some Republicans.
This shutdown was brought to you by Rand Paul.
It was.
Right? By the Kentucky Republican senator who wanted to make a stand.
He was self-indulgent because he has disrupted life today for hundreds of thousands of federal workers for no really discernible purpose.
Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, get us up to date.
Yeah, Joe, he very unpopular among the folks here. And
you have Rand Paul complaining about those Obama deficits. That's sort of rich, because the reason for the last-minute drama was Republican Senator Rand Paul.
Clearly, Rand Paul was very unpopular with his Senate colleagues.
Yeah, this did not go over particularly well for Senator Paul. It was a promotional tactic on this issue, some would say on Rand Paul himself.
Rand Paul did succeed in making everybody feel uncomfortable because they were exhausted.
I actually liked what Rand Paul had to say, but here to discuss the issue are Republican Congressman Sean Duffy of Wisconsin, who voted for the bill, and radio talk show host Garland Nixon. Thank you both for being here. Sean, Congressman Duffy, I was able to serve with you, and it's an honor and privilege to do so, and I thank you for joining us tonight. Now, you voted for the bill. There's obviously a compelling reason you did that. Why did you vote for the bill?
So listen, we're in a situation, Jason, where we have a dilapidated military. We have planes that can't fly because we can't get spare parts. We give our military a mission to accomplish, but we don't give them the resources to accomplish that mission. The sequester has crushed our ability to defend ourselves, and we have rising threats, whether it's China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. And we passed a bill out of the House that was conservative, and I supported that bill. But as you know all too well, and I think your listeners hear this quite a bit, when our bill went to the Senate, you can't pass it with just Republican votes. You need Democrat votes. So Chuck Schumer, to deliver votes, extracted additional spending. And so we had a choice in the House. Do we take the deal that
Chuck Schumer threw more spending into, but also gets our military back on track to address the needs that we have in the world? Or do we say no and keep these really horrible budget caps in the military that don't let them accomplish their mission? And for me, I don't like the spending that's in this bill, but I also want to make sure our military men and women can defend us and accomplish the mission that we give them.
Now, Garland, if you were in Congress, how would you have voted? Do you think this is a good bill, or would you have voted against it?
Well, of course, if I was in Congress, I'd have been pushing to hold out for DACA from the from the left side. But my feeling is this: I think that in my opinion, I think there are some reductions that we could do in the military, and I think we could have done that by bringing some of our troops home by from Afghanistan. But additionally, I think it's kind of disingenuous to say that you came up with a bill and then you were shocked to find out that there was another party in Congress that you were going to have to go through. I don't remember in my lifetime when one party had supermajorities in both houses and the White House, but where they didn't have to bargain for something.
Obamacare. Think back of 2009 and 2010 when they got Obamacare. They had a supermajority in the Senate and shoved Dodd-Frank and Obamacare down our throats.
Yeah, I mean, they were able to use the tool of reconciliation, but why didn't the Democrats unanimously vote for this? I mean, there was nothing that was cut of any substance. And it supported our military, something I thought Democrats were supportive of. But why? And I understand the need to do DACA, but I don't think you go any further than what President Trump, Speaker Ryan, and Mitch McConnell have done in saying we need to address it. By the way, Barack Obama was president for 8 years. They never addressed the immigration issue.
I agree, and I wish they had. I wish they'd addressed it if they had addressed it when they had the majorities in the House. But they didn't, so we are where we are now. And the problem is now, for the people that didn't go for it, that the Democrats don't have any leverage for DACA. They threw that all out, so now they may not even get anything. So I think the Democrats that held out, it wasn't because of the budget. It was for other reasons.
Now,
hey, Jason, I don't think we can fall. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, we can't fall into the trap of thinking that the Democrats are supporting the military. They've been using the military as leverage to get all kinds of other spending. But if they really cared about the military, we could have addressed this issue months ago and given the military the resources they need to accomplish the mission. And to come on here and say that they actually are supporters of the military, they haven't been. They're with Garland. They want to see military spending depleted. And they want us to pull out of very rough regions of the world, whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan. Well, we saw how well that worked for us. That was the rise of ISIS. When Barack Obama pulled out and left a vacuum in his place, all of a sudden you have people burning their enemies and beheading people. We have to be smarter about our policy, and cutting the military is not smart policy, again, with rising threats that we have in the world.
I have to go very quickly, but Congressman, how do you answer the question that Rand Paul was out there saying, look, Republicans were opposed to these deficits when President Obama was in place, but now that they're Donald Trump, we seem to be okay with $1 trillion deficit next year. How do you answer that?
So first of all, you're using growth numbers that are Obama growth numbers. When you get Trump growth numbers at 3.5%, 4.5% growth, those deficits aren't going to be that big. But again, that's the problem when Chuck Schumer's a big spender and is leveraging the military for additional spending in non-military defense, non-military discretionary spending. That's the deal that had to be made. And again, for me, this was a tough vote, but I sided with the military because I think that's the most immediate threat. We're going to have to deal with, and one last point, I know you got to go. If we're going to deal with that, you have to deal with entitlements. Entitlements are the key to reducing this massive outflow in the government, and until you get to that, you're not going to address the massive deficit and debts.
Thank you, Congressman. I'll give you the last word. Paul Ryan, the Speaker, has said that he wants to address the entitlement reform. Is that something that you or the Democrats, do you think, could get behind and support?
I certainly hope not. I feel as though
there's the problem. There's the problem, ladies and gentlemen.
That's the third rail.
I hope not. That's the problem. Is that to suggest that we're actually going to address entitlements? That's going to be the problem. I've got to leave it there.
Jason,
thank you both very much.
No.
Thank you. I've got to go
for Medicaid. Simple.
Coming up next, we leave it to Clint Eastwood to throw all filmmaking norms out the window. The real-life heroes who stopped an ISIS terror attack is coming up next. You're going to hear their incredible story. Clint Eastwood's newest film is creating a big buzz, defying all conventional movie-making norms by using real-life heroes to play themselves. The movie stars 3 Americans who stopped an ISIS terrorist attack on a train in France in 2015. Fox News contributor Raymond Arroyo spoke with the stars of 1517 to Paris.
Gents, I want to talk about this experience. Of course, it made international headlines. It threw you all into the world's consciousness. Alec, you and your friends are on this train. They're sleeping, but you're awake. What did you hear, and what made you take action and waken them?
Well, I was just hanging out, texting some friends back home, and like 2 hours, 3 hours into the trip, I heard a gunshot and breaking glass. And I kind of put my head up because I wasn't sure if that was what I had heard or not. I couldn't exactly define it at the time. And while I was thinking about that, a train employee ran kind of past us away from the noise at full sprint, and so that woke them up, and we all kind of looked back to see who he was running from, and there was a shirtless man with an AK-47. So ducked behind the seats, and I was like, Spencer, go get him, and Spencer took off.
And that was it. Let's go. And Spencer, you take off down the middle of this train, heedless that the guy has an AK-47 pointed at you. What made you run at him at that moment?
I mean, honestly, it was just, we just wanted to live. It was pure survival. And I kind of caught a moment down the aisle where I saw him maybe either jam the gun or maybe the safety was on. All I knew is that he hadn't started shooting yet. And so I pretty much just saw it as a window of opportunity, like, you know, hey, it's either now or never. We're gonna die either way, so might as well give it a shot. And that's what really sprung me out of my seat.
Wow. Anthony, your two friends have military training. You do not, yet you went after them up the aisle as well.
Yeah, I think my motivator was them being lifelong friends of mine, that it kind of shut down my brain process, and it was like once they jumped into action, I had to just go help, really, at that point. It was a kind of all in or nothing type of situation.
And Spencer, you grabbed this guy, a member of an ISIS cell. He's got an AK-47. That's not all he was packing, apparently.
Yeah.
What happened when you tackled him?
When I tackled him, I was trying to grab the AK from him a little bit. I was practicing jiu-jitsu at the time, so I kind of just went straight to that. And we both stood up. I put him in a rear naked choke, slammed myself against the window. So he's on top of me at this point, and he pulls out a pistol that he had just shot Mark McGallion with. And he tries to shoot me with that, but luckily there was no ammunition in it. And Alec runs up, pries the pistol out of his hands. As soon as the pistol gets out of his hand, he grabs a box cutter and starts cutting the back of my neck, almost trying to slit my throat with it, and then comes across and slices my left thumb to the bone, severs my tendon and nerve. And I looked over his shoulder, saw the knife, and him kind of flailing around. I screamed, he's got a knife, and I kicked him off me, and then we all kind of punched him and kicked him for a little bit, and I mean, the fight went on from there, too. But
unbelievable. Do you believe, Alec, that there was a divine hand in all of this, in the way these events transpired?
If you add up all the odds of us being in that time and place and all the circumstances that put us there, all the circumstances that went towards us surviving it, I mean, that's going to be in the movie, too, but it's just, to me, is too astronomical to be coincidence.
So as if all this wasn't terrifying enough, Anthony, you all decide we're going to approach Clint Eastwood with our book and our story. He decides to do this film and casts you all as yourselves. This had to be a little intimidating, having never acted before. You didn't do theater, you didn't do
never
anything.
A school play or anything.
Nothing.
So we thought when he picked up the picture that would be good enough. Like, oh, this is the mountaintop. He wants to do our story. We thought that was great. And then 3 weeks before we start shooting, we thought we were meeting the actors who were playing ourselves. And he's like, you mind reenacting things for us on camera? And we're like, sure, we'll show the actors for accuracy. And he's like, he says it again. And then we're like, Mr. Eastwood, what do you mean here? Like, you kind of sound like you're asking us to be in the movie. He's like, sure, why not? Like, you boys should just do it.
Alec, you spent a lot of time with him on the set, Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time with him on set. I mean, he worked longer days than we did, and we spent a lot of time with him outside of set, just hanging out, getting food, getting drinks. We even would work out with him from time